Ugh, I hate snowy days. I mean, I know it's not even snowing, but it's just something that I hate. However, another thing I hate is not solving a mystery. I even have a perfect record that would put the Scooby-Doo gang to shame. But there's still one mystery that bugs the crap out of me. And yes, I'm talking about the mystery of Bethesda's horror game. I mean, I would look it up, but my internet is blocked because of, well, you could put the pieces together. Although, everything changed when she walked into my life. "Hey, sexy, what do you want?" She then came closer and whispered in my ears, "I know Bethesda's horror game." I was shocked and aroused. I decided to ask if she could fill me in on the details, and she offered me to open her up. Like, literally, open her up. My hands were shaking like a kid on Christmas Day with a Nintendo 64, but I knew this mystery had to be laid to rest one way or another. So when I opened that box up, I was filled with so much. Hey, wait a minute. This is just Fallout 76. I mean, yeah, it is pretty damn scary, but this isn't what I was looking for. Upside down? How the hell that's gonna fix anything? Looks like I'm gonna need some new underwear. I want you to tell me this. When you hear the word Bethesda, what game comes to mind? Some may think of the huge medieval RPG, The Elder Scrolls, or maybe even the radioactive-induced world of Fallout. But I think we all know what the true answer is. It's beautiful. Bethesda, a game company that is notoriously well known for their array of interactive narratives and worlds within their hit RPG franchises. And while they have developed a multitude of groundbreaking titles, they didn't shy too far away from the publishing side as well. Being under ZeniMax Media, Bethesda Softworks is the publishing side of Bethesda Studios. Oh yes, Bethesda can develop their own games like Home Alone or The Terminator, but when it comes to Pirates of the Caribbean, that's where they draw the line. Alongside Bethesda Softworks, ZeniMax also holds other developers, such as ID Software, Machine Games, and Arcane Studios. But the one developer we want to focus on today is the smaller studio of Tango Gameworks. Tango Gameworks started out by the Resident Evil creator himself, Shinji Mikami, who decided to make a studio of his own after leaving Capcom. Him and a small crew started development on a new game in the year of 2010, and after being bought out by the previously mentioned ZeniMax, they would focus on making their current sci-fi adventure game into a more survival horror one. The main reason behind this was because Mikami noticed a demand for true survival horror, and since he had experience with one of the most successful survival horror games ever made, it was a no-brainer to tackle the genre in his own unique way. So with the right financial budget and a much bigger development team, Tango Gameworks started development on the game we know as today, The Evil Within. What started out as a concept of two chained-up vampire hunters became a single-player detective story about the crazy conscience of one man. The concept and tense atmosphere of the game really got people excited by its trailers, and upon release met with pretty good reviews. It wasn't the most groundbreaking game to the genre, but it was just fun enough to warrant getting a sequel 3 years later, which also was met with pretty favorable reviews. Now I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm a newcomer to the series because when it initially came out, I was playing better games, like Nintendo Land. And at the time, I just wasn't too intrigued by the survival horror genre. But as the years passed and my taste of games developed, I eventually got more to the genre over time, with games like Dead Space, Outlast, and of course, Resident Evil. I started getting more and more into the idea of being strict on supplies, and, also being a little bitch. So after years of pushing this game to the side and hearing my sister clamoring to be the best game ever made, I'm finally gonna sit down and play The Evil Within. And don't worry, I bought spares. The game starts off with a multitude of game company splash screens, with this one specifically being my favorite. Son of a bitch. We then cut to the title screen, which, ew, is that a trademark? Get me the fuck out of here. The game's story begins in the rainy area of Crimson City, where we get to meet our fun and colorful cast of characters. The main guy we play as is Detective Sebastian Castellanos, an emotionless run-of-the-mill detective who always has something quirky to say.
There's gotta be something that'll get through this. Maybe a chainsaw or something.
Around him are his partners of the law, Julie Kidman and Joseph Oda, and both of these characters are pure example of something. Joseph acts as a side character of Sebastian, and throughout the story he has this whole not dying thing going on, so it makes it pretty interesting to see him suffer. Kidman, on the other hand, is like a child with 200 doses of sugar because she can't stay the F still. No matter how close you get to her, she's always like, "Bye, bitches." However, for the other characters throughout the game, they're more so in the back seat for the majority of it, and there's not really too many moments where an emotionally invested scene happens with any of these characters. But I would argue and say that the characters in this game isn't its main focus, and it's more so what's going on around them. For example, murder. You see, Fred, Shaggy, and Daphne was called in to investigate a mass murder at the Beacon Mental Hospital. There they find, yep, that's some dead bodies, but hey, there's also a living one. And after investigating some of the camera footage and seeing 1, 2, 3 more dead bodies, Sebastian and his crew gets thwacked by this Assassin's Creed wannabe named Ruvik. Ruvik here acts as the game's main villain, and while at the beginning of the story you don't really know what his clear intentions are, you'll slowly uncover it throughout the 13 chapters of the game. But we don't have to worry about that right now, because it looks like Sebastian has found himself in a head-turning predicament. You see what I did there? You know what? Fuck it. If you're not gonna laugh at my jokes, then I'll just become friends with this chainsaw-wielding guy. Hey, dude, you wanna play Minecraft together? I'm gonna suspect he's more of a Terraria guy. Here is where we start to notice that things just aren't right. I mean, it seems like we're a far cry from the mental hospital that we were just at, and now we're in this torture chamber area with this weirdo. Within this first chapter, we're completely on our own, and even at times become disabled with some of our basic functions. But fear not, we are able to grasp some of the core gameplay fundamentals within this area. You got your walking, your running, your dying, you know, all the things that make a survival horror game. And while this first chapter doesn't teach much about the combat side of the game, it can still create some tense-ass moments, especially with the first stealth part with Mr. Chainsaw over here. I swear, I died about 10 times at this part because he kept seeing my shadow. If I wanted to play a realistic game, I would have played Nintendo Land, thank you very much. However, it doesn't take long until we find our way out of this hellhole, and we reunite with our friends. We even get to meet 2 new characters, with this doctor guy and the insane patient known as Leslie.
Fine.
Fall! Fall!
I'm guaranteed this won't get annoying later on. On our escape via ambulance, we continue to see some bizarre imagery with complete buildings shifting on their own and whatnot. But things really don't get crazy until the driver gets a bad case of acne and Kidman decides to warn us with a grand slam jump scare.
Look out! Fall! Fall! Fall!
Huh, well, I guess that completes my review of The Evil Within. Oh, he's one of those characters. Here we find ourselves in a colorless hospital with this sexy nurse, and it acts as a safe room of sorts for the rest of the game. And while there's not much to do when we first enter this place, we'll slowly return back to it with certain key story moments and these broken mirrors scattered around the world. But for now, let's see how our guy Sebastian is holding up in the real world. Holy damn, let me check his inventory real quick. That son of a bitch, when did he drink a fire-resistant potion? So now we finally get our first line of defense, a revolver. And look at this, we also get to kill our first enemy. Oh shit, it's Acne Boy! I gotta pop those pimples! I think I got him. I'm sure right off the bat, the first thing your little eyeballs notice is the unique aspect ratio this game came with. And while I played the whole thing using this aspect ratio because I don't know, I was too lazy to figure out how to turn it off, many people upon release did not like it at all. I mean, it does cover up a good 25% of the screen, and it can make looking out for different collectibles and enemies a huge nuisance. But for me, it makes the whole game feel more claustrophobic, and it even adds to the bizarreness of the whole package. However, for the people who wanted a more natural screen size, an option was added later on to gather that sort of audience, and even stuck around with the idea for the next entry. No matter what people said though, there was no denying that the game's gameplay loop was by far its best aspect. Of course, with this title being inspired by Resident Evil and all, it plays as a third-person survival horror experience with the limited weapons and items you need to barely skate through hordes of enemies, and clearly some of that good old puzzle solving. Oops. And while the game does wear its inspiration on its sleeve at times, especially with the first village area, it does offer up its own unique gimmicks that create some interesting scenarios. Matches, for example, are used for getting rid of knockdown enemies. Now, on paper, this seems kinda pointless, mainly because you can just stomp them to death if needed. But with the right technique, matches can actually be used to eliminate groups of enemies with just one match. It's actually really helpful with some of the hordes you'll encounter, and I can't tell you how much it saved my ass when playing through some of the tougher parts. However, matches isn't the only unique addition, because the crossbow holds a pretty good spot in that regard as well. You see, the game has its main weapons you'll use to fight enemies. You got your typical revolver, rifle, magnum, and my always personal favorite, shotgun. But it adds an interesting one with the Agony crossbow, which uses the appropriately named Agony bolts. Agony bolts are the game's elemental weapons, where each one serves a purpose of its own. Of course, you got your normal bolts that are the most common, but you also got the shock bolts, freeze bolts, flash bolts, and the best one, explosion bolts. And man, I can't tell you how many times I've used this bolt, and it's by far the best one in my eyes. Then again, I may just be a psychopath who's obsessed with explosions, so take my words with a grain of gunpowder. Huh. I swear that should have worked. But these bolts can be obtained by either searching around the world or using your gathered trap parts to create new ones. The crafting option is by far the more accessible way, seeing how disarmable traps are scattered all throughout this twisted world, and they're usually easily detectable. Most of the time. Okay, that's enough of the explosions. However, the traps are a great way to keep the player on their toes when sneaking around enemies, and with the level's layout being as open as they are, it makes it for a fun experience to plan your strategy on how to take out these hordes that are in your way. But like mentioned before, you do have these breathers in between enemy encounters, with these cracked mirrors that plays a unique version of the song Clair de Lune. It gives off the same feeling as the music with Resident Evil 4, where it's this calming and soothing melody that relieves the player and tells them that everything is gonna be alright. Until shit starts getting weird in the hospital room. I guess here I should also elaborate on what this safe room can actually do for the player, and it's honestly really useful. Here in the hospital, you can find some lore articles that expand the story a bit, unlock certain items and ammunition with hidden keys placed very carefully in the world, and of course, upgrade your stats with the scattered brain juice you'll find on your adventures. And while some of the upgrades are very welcome, especially the damage boosters, the main thing you want to upgrade first is the damn sprint. For a detective that's been in the force for a while, Sebastian's running speed is that of a 90-year-old grandma. I swear, you can't get anywhere with this default sprint, and it makes it all the much better when he runs like he's ready to release the floodgates on the 12 Taco Supremes he ate earlier that day. Oh no. Now, the other things you can upgrade are the different attributes on your weapons and Agony bolts, as well as your stock and physical abilities. All of these come together very nicely, and I found myself balancing out just about each category. Besides the Agony bolts, I just kinda stuck with upgrading the explosive bolts for the whole game, because I can't help myself. But don't worry, upgrading for Sebastian is painless. I mean, I know the chair looks deadly and all, but it's just for show. Wait, I can upgrade my shotgun stock? Sorry, Seb, just take this one for the team. The only thing I did wish was upgradable though was the beautiful performance issues throughout the game, because by God are they distractible. Even with the latest update on my PS4 Pro, this 2014-year-old game still has problems when it comes to the frame rate and texture popping. Now, the frame rate isn't too abundant, and I really only found it to be a problem during the more open-esque areas, but the texture popping is nearly in every cutscene. It can definitely pull you out of the mood when half the world is still loading in when the camera cuts, and it's really weird because you barely see this during the actual game. However, if the frame rate and the texture problems don't pull you out of the game's tone, I'm sure some of the game's writing and voice acting would do the trick, because oh boy are they cheesy. Now, it's definitely not as bad as some people may think, and I think each actor does a solid job on portraying how their characters are feeling most of the time. But there are some parts that just feel so off. Like, the voice acting can range from pretty good to
Another one of those doors.
wow, did you just wake up? But I'm not going to sit here and deny that it makes the game worse, because I honestly think the simple acting and cheesy writing makes the game just a bit better. It reminds me again of Resi 4, where some of the lines Leon says are just downright ridiculous.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
But for some reason, it just works. And yeah, you may not be too invested into the story when Sebastian reacts like this when he sees his friends fall down a giant hole and possibly die.
Joseph! Kidman!
Cool. But there's something that's just so campy and charming about the way it's portrayed that I can't help myself by not enjoying it the way I do. And hey, at least it's not as bad as Tenchu.
I know what you want. You want the stone. It's safe inside my belly.
However, the one thing this game does extremely well above all else is its world and designs. Seeing how the game takes place inside the conscious of the villain Ruvik, the world is constantly filled with these unique and bizarre set pieces. You have the previously mentioned city area, which you get to explore later on by the way, but then you get to the more unique locations, like the haunted-filled church, which uses brighter colors to convey quote-unquote safetiness. But my favorite area by far has to be the Victorian home of Ruvik, because here you get to play hide and seek with the pizza face fucker and learn more about his backstory. While exploring around, we find out via small flashbacks that our guy Ruvik went from a smart young child to a mentally unstable psychopath that killed his parents to financially further his project. You know what? That's it. I'm calling Dr. Phil. Hey, Dr. Phil, I need your help. This Ruvik kid is just a murderer. He's all upset because his sister died in a barn fire. Like, what an idiot, am I right? Alright, you deal with him. Have fun. Whatever you do, though, never call Ruvik by his real name, Ruben, because he'll kill you if you don't call him by his damn gamer tag. There's a lot of dying in this game. Within this haunted house bullshit, we also find out that the whole science fair project Ruvik has been working on happens to be the device that is currently causing Sebastian and his friends to be stuck in this jumble nightmare. Introducing STEM, and well, it's a bit complicated. I'm not going to go too much into detail about the whole story since there are better Evil Within experts out there, but to sum it up, Ruvik created the system to connect brains into one consciousness, but his mentor, who is the doctor guy from earlier, takes credit for his work. Meanwhile, the underground organization known as Mobius, who had connections with their doctor guy, got rid of Ruvik and used his brain to power the system. You know, something like that. Again, I'm not an expert, so if you want to know more, 1, play the game, or 2, I don't really have a second one. But while we're on the subject, I might as well state the most controversial and hated aspect of this game. Its story. It seems to be the biggest thing people complain about when reviewing this game, and while I personally think the story is really unique and is filled with plenty of twists, the way it's laid out can definitely be confusing for newer players. The biggest reason behind this is because the game jumbles between place to place with no rhyme or reason. At one second you're in a cave area with these nightmare-fueled monsters, and then the next you're back in the crumbling city area. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be coherent since we are in the mind of a mentally ill psychopath, but it does give the player a hard time understanding the story, especially if you don't have any prior knowledge about the game. For me though, I had the Evil Within expert, aka my sister, watching as I was playing and filling me in on the little details as I went. And not everyone has that kind of experience, so I can imagine for some people that by the time the game started getting more closed in on its story, the less they cared about it overall. And since most of the backstories and details are predominantly explained through documents and flashbacks, it just makes it for an overall confusing mess. But like I said before, altogether, the story is a very unique addition to the survival horror genre, and even with some of its plot holes, I fairly enjoyed my time with it. But definitely not as much as the boss fights. So let's talk about the monster designs real quick, and may I say that they are, in my opinion, some of the best in recent horror games. Yeah, the basic enemies known as the Haunted isn't anything to scoff at, but when it comes to the boss creatures, you know the developers brought their all. Two of the more iconic ones have to be Laura, the spider bitch, and the Keeper. Laura actually has a pretty neat backstory, seeing how she's the manifestation of Ruvik's dead sister. And for a girl that died in a barn fire and has more limbs than I can count, she doesn't look too bad. Actually, if I'm being honest, I think she's coming right towards... Oh God, too close, too close! The other iconic creature has to be hands down the Keeper. I'm sure most people have seen this guy with the game's marketing, but he's probably one of the most unique bosses to fight. Yeah, he shares some similarities to Pyramid Head from Silent Hill 2, but the idea of him being able to teleport with other safe heads laying around makes his battle so tense. Especially when you have to quickly mash the X button to turn the valve, because it wouldn't be a horror game if no valves are turned. Ask Fallout 76, I'm sure they have a valve in there somewhere. And with that being said, that just about wraps up what I like and dislike about this game. So how about we finally take a look into the conclusion of this weird-ass journey. And if you've watched this far into the video and you're still interested in playing the game, then I'd highly recommend skipping to this part of the video in order to avoid any major in-game spoilers. Alright, you got your underwear? Let's go. So after chapters upon chapters of reuniting and then losing friends over and over again, the game finally comes to its final showdown at the very first place we visited, the Beacon Mental Hospital. Here, you guessed it, weird shit happens. More so, Ruben starts to get more and more paranoid about the whole breaking out of the system thing, and all you know is if he gets his hands on the insane patient Leslie, then he may be able to escape his own invention and kill in the real world. So after working your way through the hospital and stalking some crazy guys, we finally meet our best hide-and-seek friend, and well, he looks pretty pissed that we didn't call him by his gamer tag. But don't worry, fire fixes everything. What the fuck is this? Here the game starts throwing you into what I call, hey bitches, time to use up all your resources. First you have to fight waves of enemies to progress through this nightmare, and then you have to fight what's after one? Oh yeah, 2 keepers. The best strategy I found for this fight is to run in circles until you use almost every single bullet. Only then the door opens to the final stealth section of the game. Damn, it's almost as good as Assassin's Creed stealth. But this ultimately ends up back at our Ruvik guy, and look, he's ready to give Leslie a big ol' hug. Oh wow, he just straight up turned him into piss. And finally we get to the final boss fight, and he sure looks damn ugly. I never really get why all these normal looking human bosses always have to turn into something hideous to fight a main good guy. Like, couldn't you just be a bigger version of yourself, or at least put on some makeup? But, you know what, I digress. We still have to kill this thing if we want to live. And to do that, all we have to do is run! Fucking run! However, we eventually get on a truck with a machine gun on it, and then later we get a conveniently placed bazooka. Don't ask, it doesn't have to make sense. And after some very nice headshots on our big baddie, we kill the Assassin's Creed cosplayer and escape the system of STEM, but not before a funny moment. Oh, God. Come on, Sam. All you have to do is get out of the freaking tub. The best part by far, though, has to be the sitcom ending.
Detective, are you all right? Is there anyone else?
Just give me some real fresh air.
Now, there is a little twist at the end, though, where we see a more stable functioning Leslie walking out of the hospital, and this raises some questions. Did Ruvik actually complete his plan and transferred his mind into this nobody character? And is he gonna try to continue his twisted vision into the lives of innocent people? Well, that's a mystery for another day. And that was Evil Within, a game that I honestly didn't think I would enjoy as much as I did. It definitely has its flaws, and it doesn't really add anything to the survival horror genre, but like Resident Evil, it's just a fun, cheesy 15-hour adventure that seems to be a good way to spend this Halloween season. Okay, I wrote this in September, give me a break. And for anyone who's craving more of the series when it first came out, they ended up adding 3 DLC packs to the game. One is an arcade-like mode where you play as the Keeper, killing the different bosses throughout the game. which I'm really good at. But the other two are more story-focused and follows the side of Julie Kidman. I won't go too much into detail about her side since it deals with more heavy spoilers, but I will say that they're solid additions to the game's story, and it satisfyingly fills some of the plot holes from the original game. The DLC pack also dwells deeper into the organization of Mobius, and it has a more stealth-like and puzzle-focused approach when it comes to its gameplay.
Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here.
And, oh yeah, this thing will definitely give me nightmares for the next few days. And that was Bethesda's hand at trying a horror game, and I can definitely say that The Evil Within is more action than horror, but it still has its suspenseful moments and its creepy monster designs. But to say the game will make you shit your pants is definitely an understatement. The only time I really got jump scared was when I didn't see this enemy behind me when I was focused on another one. However, I didn't die for once, so that's a plus. And while I initially wanted to cover the second game in this video, I didn't really get much of the time to fit it in the schedule. I have, however, played the first few hours of it, and I can say that it's definitely improved on a bunch of aspects of the original. The story seems to be a bit more personal this time around, and performance-wise, it seems to hold up a whole lot better. Perhaps I'll cover it at another time, but for now, I think I had my horror fill, and I still highly recommend to anyone who's been having an itch to play a unique survival horror game. I mean, if you don't play them, that's fine, but it's not my fault if a psychopathic murderer forces you into his brain and makes you fight his
creative trauma thingies.
Just saying. However, if that's the case, then I guess you could say the evil was within us this whole time. Please laugh.